A girl named blank. Paige. They are all just words. She asks me every night. Sometimes Aihdah tries to convince me to stay, at least until someone writes to me, tries to locate their missing girl. It will never happen though. They all laugh. They all say a giant stork carried me in under its wings. Sometimes bad days happen. I try to run away and Aihdah catches me, and she makes all the hurt disappear and makes me forget by reading me stories while I gaze into her big green eyes. Please, you can stay as long as you need, Enniah, but you have to try and get along with the students on their free time. I want to be a student, I said. You can't. The once powerful and commanding voice of Aihdah would become weak. I'm sorry, you just aren't meant to learn our ways. You can go to normal classes with everyone else. You have to stay with them. Maybe you will pick up on things or make a friend. Have you made any friends? What about today? Are they still mistreating you? Has one girl stood up for you against the bullying? Have you made a single friend? Enniah, an echoing voice calls to me from over a wandering hillside, a voice I know to accompany a face with freckles and a fair nose without the need to look upon it. The girl named Tanya who is calling out has wavy wild red hair. It is her most visually defining trait. No one's hair is quite as jarring against their complexion, and 1. MJ Ennis. After long hours in the sun, the red of her hair sometimes bleeds down onto her skin. No one else seems to have this problem. There is no one to tell Tanya what to do or how to act. She has a gift that everyone adheres to, well, almost everyone, and it is simply power. She approaches me. Her influence does not affect me like the others in the same way. Tanya's got a plain, delicate dress that the other girls seem to envy. I'd always wonder how it all worked. Why did everyone spare Tanya, and why did everyone give her all of their attention and energy? There were 7 of us all together. I am located furthest in the back, isolated and distanced by a few rough patches in the countryside. I'd be further away, but they all sort of follow me. I could feel my face turning a reddish-pink color, the cause of anxiety, fear even. I know what happens next. There is a small yellow flower in the girl's hand. The girl's hat just referred to this flower as a dandelion. It compliments her. Whisking one piece, as white and yellow seem to go together nicely, but it clashes against her red hair in a fierce way. It is a dandelion, I know this. The other girls were watching me, huddling around over their laughter, smiling around at each other in anticipation. These smiles didn't bring me joy, however. No, they were the terrifying kind where you could see everyone's teeth. They were really into it today. Tanya turns up from the patch of dandelions she had been gathering from to ask me a question, her eyes lighting up when she lifts her head under the perfect matching bright blue sky. I apparently like to nickname things. It's not even that I don't like Tanya's freckles, because I thought they were really pretty with the red hair and all. It's just something I tended to do. I never actually called her Freckles. It's just something I used to visualize her in my head when I thought of her. What is this, Enniah? Tanya asks while holding out the wild yellow flower. Out here in the open field, I always tend to fantasize an escape. I envision climbing the fence that wraps the estate land for the horses and the dogs. Mostly it is a rickety old thing. The bottom has chicken wire fencing all the way around so dogs can't crawl underneath, and then it's just boards nailed together like crosses with the wire fencing on the lower half. I wasn't sure how it was supposed to keep things out or in, when I could imagine myself easily climbing to the other side or knocking it down with a few good kicks. It can be seen. 2. Afterlife. Mind leak. In the distance, where shortly beyond that the trees confine the rest of my known world. I couldn't turn back towards the homestead sooner than the other girls. My stepmother Aihdah believes I belong out here, and she is insistent on me surviving and making friends among my awful peers. Don't say dandelion. Tanya's counterpart named Sadie shouts over the wind. Sadie had dark brown hair that matches her eyes and is always neatly combed behind her ears. She is slightly taller and fuller, and she looks and sounds the oldest. You already know what the flower is called. We just talked about that and its name. Sadie smiles sadistically before lifting it into her pinched fingers. Then she asks her question, what is the bottom of this flower called? I hesitate. Looking wearily to the group of girls and to the flower extended in Tanya's hand, none of them seemed keen on helping me yesterday. Why would it be any different today? The whole lot of them all share classes together at the manor, classes I am not allowed to take. Sadie and Tanya have become natural leaders. They first became friends after an argument I had once with Tanya, who used to be kind of my friend. Now I don't have any friends, because I stood up for myself and my lack of general knowledge. I don't want you to come up with excuses, says Sadie, curtsying with her white and blue checkered sundress, just because you don't go to school like the rest of us. You should still know what this is called. She picked off the top half of the flower and placed it behind her ear. I imagined all the other girls would soon be picking off dandelion heads and placing them behind their ears. She took 5 controlled steps towards me, each impacting the earth more so than the last. In an attempt to frighten me, she hurled the other half at my face, and I flinched while it harmlessly struck me. A couple girls beside Tanya and Sadie snickered. The worst would come if I cried. I wouldn't. I tried to repel the urge coming over me. I didn't know what it was called, and all the other girls were thinking about how stupid I was. Tanya seemed to be annoyed with me. Come on, blank page. Don't cry. That was the nickname I was given by Tanya after our fight. I had explained that I shouldn't know the names of things because no. 3. MJ Ennis. One had ever told me, and if we're to come up with a name for things myself, they wouldn't be correct in reference to other people's beliefs. God, she is so stupid, said Tanya to her circle. I'm not stupid, I yelled back at her. I backed away in the grass, trying to keep my tears discreet. I turned away from them and hugged my knees close to my chest. I should run, but our stepmother says we have to stick together, and that when we return, we all have to be accounted for. Blank page, you know you can't run past the fence. Aihdah tells us there are things out there that will hurt you, and you are too weak to fight them off yourself. I sense a girl walking beside me and then reaching over the arch of my back. I turn to watch her pick up the narrow underside of the dandelion that resembles a tiny flimsy grass stick. I witness the girl's dark thick hair, the fun in her eyes, and the question in her hands. It's Sadie. The green narrow extremity of the flower is oozing out. Much in the way that humans bleed, except instead of red I see white, and then I wondered if plants and flowers felt pain similar to how humans do. I retreated by burying into my knees again. One of the girls approaches me from the side. I wrongly raise my head, hoping it to be Mary, a girl who occasionally sticks up for me. It is not her, unfortunately. It is a girl in a dainty white dress and fierce red hair. Tanya grins below the flame of hair. The rings of her eyes are almost transparent beside the blue sky. It's called a stem, blank page. I nod late. Please just go. Go away. You can add that to your picture book, Enniah. Tanya tosses the stem again. This time it lands in my knotty brown hair. I quickly brush it out with my buzzing hands. God knows Enniah won't ever learn to write. As she lowers her face before me, she picks up the stem again, and she adjusts it to fit securely behind my ear. I'm shaking now, trembling while tears sulk down my face. Remember, it's green, with a pencil-like bottom or neck. I look away and wipe my eyes and my arms to dry them intermittently. I want it to stop. I can tell today is going to be a bad day. A girl named Mary hadn't stuck up for me like she had in recent times. I looked around for her. She is in the back behind the rest of the girls, with a look of indifference. 4. Afterlife. Mind leak. She has the fairest of all our skin, and she likes to paint her nails dark using berries she found in the brush. I can't see them today, because they are in the pockets of her shorts. She is the youngest, not quite by a full year. She isn't quite the shortest, and she is the most creative of us all. Tanya in her sparkling white dress spins in a complete dramatic circle and captivates the other girls in an attempt to imitate me. She throws her hand over her head and wails. Wah, wah, wah. No Mary to save me. After a moment of silence, she looks longingly into my eyes, almost with a sense of intrigue or concern. She takes a step towards me. What is that, Enniah, in your eye? It's a tear. I remark instantly, trying to disclose that I do know some things. I'm not stupid. The thoughts arise. I won't cry this time, I tell myself over and over, but I do. I knew what crying was, I knew it well. Not that, blank page. I'm talking about that mud of an IU. Have. I stand up feeling insecure. Occasionally, Tanya and Sadie would hit me. This felt like one of those times. I fear her closeness and her vibrant red hair. I back away, but on my knees, there isn't much of a place to go. Leave her alone. Mary moves in closer behind two girls who now have flowers behind their ears. The two of them are standing closely behind Tanya and Sadie. Mary hates it when they do this. They sometimes make fun of my eyes because they aren't just one solid color. They reflect the outside world and the colors of nature. Perhaps they don't like the band that is unique to me, the one that wraps around the black of my eyes in a zigzagging yellow line. Mary says looks like lightning. Tanya has crisp blue eyes like the deep reflections of still water. Sadie has the dark brown eyes like the base of a tree. It just so happens that all the girls have perfectly solid eyes, just not Mary. And children, I suppose, could be cruel. They would observe the slightest difference from one to another and use it as means to neglect what wasn't in their favor. Others, like Mary, saw something greater in difference. The rest was coached. It was natural that Sadie and Tanya ruled. They were scary, and according to the organization of whatever classes they took, they clearly were at the height of it. The girls were taught, the ones who performed best. 5. MJ Ennis were leaders, and the ones who didn't followed in fear, but it was the things outside of this realm where leaders held true power. The influence of opinion on what was unknown, like the probability of risk in painting your nails or the color of your eyes. Mary's eyes aren't quite as torn as mine. They mimic the clouds with fluctuations of gray and blue. She watches me uneasily behind them while the other girls perform their act. Sadie seats herself on the backside of Tanya, pulling her red mane and thrusting her pelvis into her lifted skirt while shouting derogatory remarks and barking like a dog. Oh, please don't be too loud, Sadie sighs to her underling. We mustn't allow anyone to know of our love. Tanya barks 3 times with intermittent snarls. I can't bear it. I don't quite understand where their hatred spawns from. Tanya growls louder, air off. I cradle a pile of dirt and grass pulled from the earth beside me. You don't know what either of you are talking about, Mary exclaims. She watches them, their faces turn to her, a little more surprised than normal. I watch them laugh for a couple seconds, tears burning into my cheeks, turning to anger. I know I should run now. What are we to name our unbrained child? Asks Sadie. Enniah, Tanya growls. The clumped dirt is tight in my fist, and I whip my arm as fast as I can. Almost immediately, the dirt bomb explodes against Tanya's cheek. I never strike anyone. This surprises me. I smile for a fracture of time where they have stopped, the look on their faces while they are still mocking the likes of animals, Tanya's pale flesh marked by dirt. There is no longer a smile. Sadie is slowly dismounting from the girl who's holding her scarlet hair, pulling it back now to one side. It isn't long before my mistakes would be realized and I punished. Sadie and Tanya surround me quickly. I push away, but Tanya grabs both of my hands. I can't break free. She gestures in angry approval to the ones behind me. They pull down my pants and fill them with grass and dirt. I lose my balance around the ankles and stumble to the ground. My chin is pressed hard into the grass while Tanya spits before me. 6. Afterlife. Mind leak. You know what this is, blank page. Tanya brushes some of the minor dust from her tidy white dress, disgusted with my act. She is holding the earth in her hand, distorted clay and sediment. Sadie sits on my back and kicks Mary away, who is still trying to rescue me. A taller blonde girl named Jacqueline grabs her and makes her watch. Sophie leads 2 other girls who hadn't taken part to ease in around me. What do mutts get? Tanya asked, fixing the dandelion tucked behind her ear. They have circled me now. Sophie shyly answered. Cleaned. The white dress kneels in the dirt before me, and when I look up at her, she speaks. It's a rock, stupid. Tanya thrusts the odd-shaped stone into my mouth. I choke and try to force it out with my tongue while I remain pinned. The other girls brush my teeth with dirt, little rocks scraping the inside of my mouth. I'm stripped down to my underlayers so they can attempt to clean me. There was a point where I just let go. I endured the pain and the sadistic mystery of my peers. I'd rather run, I'd rather die. It wasn't until Mary came back again holding her torn lip and defeated self that I would try to fight. I lifted myself from the earth and torn land. I spit the jagged rocks and a single red tooth into the dirt at my side and rolled. Tanya fell over my chest. I pulled her hair and scavenged my tooth. I knew the thought of blood on Tanya's dress would frighten her, and it did. I backed away until Sadie grabbed one of my arms. "Let Enniah go," said Mary. Everyone turned from me to face the brave Mary. "I'll teach her." Mary's eyes filled with fear when everyone had challenged her heroic confidence. Jacqueline released her. Mary then looked up at her. "I'll teach her." The others all did what Tanya and Sadie had always done, but still Mary found a way to be as brave as any could be. "I'll teach her what her little brain will allow." "You can't teach her anything, you half-wit," Tanya snarled. It was quiet for a moment. The grass moved in the gentle breeze. And just when I and all the others believed Mary was retreating from her wishes, she swung. She swung hard and high, strongly and with passion, until her buried fingers collided against Tanya's jaw. The white princess fell slowly to the ground, and we all stared in momentary silence. 7. MJ Ennis. I turned in that moment both shocked and inspired. I'm sure it was the shock that left her in the grass unable to get up. Tanya was definitely still conscious, just confused and fascinated. I mimicked the actions Mary had shown me. I had learned something after all. I stepped backwards and then quickly lurched forward while her attention was localized around Tanya's collapsed body and with my clasped hand tightly bound to one destination. I knocked my bare hand across Sadie's face, extending my force as far as my reach would allow, following my friend's commitment. I backed away. Her face was darkened, damaged even. She had finally looked like me, possibly for a fraction of a second, knowing how I felt on any given day of my miserable existence here. Sadie quickly levered her arms into the earth, backing away, sulking. "I'm reporting this," she said while she got to her feet. "Don't," Mary pleaded. "You shouldn't. It would be unwise. That would just get us all in trouble. Just take it today and appreciate that you learned something." "And what is that?" asked a shy girl, who usually never spoke. Mary smiled to this as if she wanted someone to ask. "That Enniah is brave, powerful, and someday stronger than us all." Asterisk, 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 it's been years since that happened. I'm a 17-year-old girl now, and yet those events still haunt me, and it was one of many. There is so much more to that story, but my pen is fading. It is strange in that the memory I have of those things are very vivid, but what connects them is clouded and uncertain. It is as if there are short blocks of vivid pictures stacked along a line, and then the parts between them are sort of lost in the passing of my life. I hadn't had anything of importance between those blocks, and so it was sort of fuzzy. That's the reasoning I gave myself. Now I am under the watch of the very teacher who had raised the other girls and their intellect. However, I am not sure why they were all so mean. It seemed so unnatural. I grabbed for a new pen, as my final words were starting to become much too difficult to mark on the parchment. 8. Afterlife. Mind leak. I can write now, Sadie. I practice every day, and this week I learned that at any given moment your eyes are only concentrating on a single point smaller than a fist, and that the rest of what we see is being worked out from memory and blurred lines. Maybe that's why you couldn't see my fist coming. I wanted to write more about how much it hurt to physically punch you, as Mary called it, and how I think I could have avoided it all if I had only been where I am today with knowing things. I felt as though my wrist was cut deeply and ached for days. I pushed the final words into my diary upon hearing a woman's voice carrying from afar. Away into the cupboard drawer those written words went, in a secret compartment in the back that I had made by nailing another board in the rear of the tray. From above, even eyes that were looking for obscurities in an already crooked place would have trouble noticing the slant. I hid this away with many other diaries and things. They all had different names too. Some were labeled for the secrets, others were in relation to how I felt, and some were based on the books I read. I also had a photograph of Mary. I hadn't looked at it today, so I kind of had forgotten why I thought it was a funny picture. I think it has to do with maybe how she was standing alongside the trees outside. I would look again next week. Aihdah's voice calling out to me. I didn't keep many things secret, but the writing about what happened before Aihdah agreed to teach me what the other girls learned could potentially break a promise I once made. Enniah, come here please. We need to discuss something of importance. My mother's words tally from the nearest stairwell. She is in fact quite far away. However, she has a gift for screaming through the emptiness of our household. It's just her and I for 2 months, and the occasional houseworker. I did as she wanted. Moments later, I was again at her heel. I stand just beneath her crown of hair, her remarkably sturdy and thick auburn hair. Her green eyes captivate me, and I notice some peculiar pantings of shapes in the hall. Behind her, they kind of told a story, triangles, simple enough, but from left to right though. 9. Ennis. Author had added more triangles to each medium, where they began to overlap. In the final third frame there was a star, and instead of adding triangles, it seemed to just be 2 which overlapped each other like this. I am shy by just an inch or 2. She stares into my eyes intently. Thank you for taking this seriously, she said calmly. Remember I told you, I warned you rather, that there might be a time I need you? I nod. I do. To save the world, right? I laughed demurely. Of course I remember. How could I forget? You tell me, every single day. Aihdah's emerald eyes were unforgiving. Tonight, Enniah, you are to remain in your chambers and do not leave them. But why? I answered abruptly. You just said you needed me? That is what I need you to do. 10. Chapter 2. Beyond the Fence. Mary and I ran that day until our legs couldn't carry us any further. They will pick on me now, said Mary. We had reached the furthest fence from the estate. The building was small in the distance, so small that a majority of what was visible over the horizon could sit in the flat of my hand. It was still a sight from here, beside the wooden posts and beside Mary. Its 3-story stone walls and guardian tree looming in the center of the courtyard. I felt safer here, far from every other person. Still, we had not crossed the fence. I placed my hands upon the dried wood and turned to hope Mary would follow. Why don't you come with me? I asked. I can't. My mother would miss me. This seemed to take my attention and placed it towards my parents. I obviously had them. Everyone had parents, right? I must have looked silly to Mary, holding my head not being able to remember anything about them. My head and chest began to hurt, and I knew it was because I was thinking about them. Don't be sad, Enniah, Mary pleaded. I want to come with you, you understand, don't you? I nodded and began clearing the excess of nature's markings from my clothes and lips. Thanks, Mary. You have been the best friend. I don't see how things could have gone any other way. I do, said Mary. This wasn't supposed to happen. The highest planned it this way, it couldn't have been by chance. 11. Ennis. At the time this confused me. I even questioned if Mary had spoken correctly, but I was quiet about this. I didn't believe in much of anything the other girls spoke about. She had just stood up for my existence. Maybe there was something wrong with me inherently, like my physical self. Maybe I couldn't do the things they could. The things the other girls said about me, I must have done something absolutely awful by their standards. The thing was, I didn't remember much of my life before this place. It was a blur. Where I came from was discussed by the others. A giant whale delivered her on shore where she was starved of the necessary nutrients to survive, or I think that she was hatched from my pet rock. The most common, however, that usually was expressed in an uninspiring manner was that I was a black pullet. I didn't know what this meant or what it was, and the furthest explanation for this was presumably because Aihdah said I was. Delivered by a giant stork, which none of the girls believed was possible, so they all made fun of me for it. I am simply just a lost girl who did not know what she wanted or what was true. Aihdah will be coming shortly. Recess will be over, and you can guarantee that there will be some exaggerations on your behavior. I stared at Mary and her cloudy eyes. The wound in her lower lip had dried and her cheeks had become mildly dirty. I wanted to ask her what exaggerations meant, but suddenly it had occurred to me. They obviously would have to tell a great horror of me, and for it to be convincing it would have to be lies or stretches from the truth, like Mary and I had started the fight. For whatever reason, Aihdah did not take sides. She would punish us all the same. Mary hugged me at that point. "Everything will be okay," she said, still tightly wrapped around my neck. "It wasn't good for you here." Nothing came to me. I hadn't ever thought of a plan. I always saw myself running away only to escape. I'd never thought about my loneliness or of crossing the fence. "Do you think it's true?" I asked, envisioning my fears. Aihdah had always spoken of monsters, faint creatures, my stepmother would say, that lived beyond the fence. Mary looked to me very decisively, first challenging the thought like it was a dark fairy tale, and then nodding to herself. "It. 12. Afterlife. Mind leak. Seems improbable," she said, looking out beyond the fence. "I don't know if such evil things exist. Not just beyond the fence, but anywhere." I nodded, trying to imagine the things Mary and the other girls were taught in school. How one could wonder the possibility that things couldn't stretch beyond themselves and what they experienced. I was different. I knew so little in fact, that anything was possible. Perhaps I was creating my fears by allowing them to exist. Mary broke me away from these thoughts. "I don't know," she said plainly. I looked to her, wanting to hear more. "It's just that Aihdah has never lied." Mary's words hypnotized me. "Here, I'll help you." Mary placed her support beneath my right leg using her arm. I struggled with aching pains in my side, so when I tried to climb, halfway through I just caved to the aching muscle, so Mary lifted me upwards until I was able to part myself from her. Using the little strength I had, then I was perched between the estate and the deep unknown woods atop the fence that separated the two worlds. Dense woodlands consumed the other side of the fence like a heavy fog. Nothing could be seen between the trunks and branches, ranging in every size. It seemed quiet, but occasionally insects and birds would chirp. I don't know where I'll go now that I am here. I had never left the fence land before. The thoughts and plans of what I would do when I got to the other side had never occurred to me. Two of the other girls could be seen in the distance on Mary's side of the fence, accompanied by an adult. "What are you waiting for, Enniah? Go," she yelled. I lifted my other leg over the fence, and I said my goodbyes. "I'll miss this, Mary," I said. She nodded. "I'll miss it too." I ran from the coming voices, further than I had ever ran before. I looked back periodically, reassuring myself that Mary had left. There was no one. The fence dwindled away with each passing glance, and eventually it too was swallowed by the crowding of trees. I stopped, panting and grasping all of the spots that ached and favored pain, and I hoped for Mary's safety and then my own. 13. MJ Ennis. Studied my surroundings, staying alert for whatever may have lived on this side of the fence. I saw nothing for a time, just old dried up leaves and swaying limbs. I had not even seen rodents of some degree, no, not even a chipmunk or squirrel. Even in the large, empty rooms of the estate, the ones I was alone admitted to, I had never felt this alone. I saw a single harmless flower several feet before me, yellow and gold, with a white core and a strong green stem. There was a rock beside it in the clearing. I sat myself on the stone emerging from the earth, shaded from the surrounding trees, but spaciously empty overhead. I felt hungry, faint even. I hadn't thought about food or shelter. I had been so tormented that I hadn't pictured anything but running. Why? I suddenly whimpered. I threw my hands over my face and I cried again. An hour or so had passed, I knew not of the time. I'd finally seen movement. I saw a squirrel chasing a rabbit. It was a bizarre thing to see. Squirrels don't eat rabbits. At least it didn't seem logical or expected. They ran off in the bushes beside me, and I started wondering about the things I thought I might see, and how I hadn't seen them. Maybe I was seeing things and I was truly alone. Maybe I was supposed to hunt the rabbit to eat it. I hadn't seen anything novel to me, especially dangerous, despite the rumors of monsters and perilous things. Maybe it was all made up, but who would make something like that up and why? The sun began lowering through the trees. I stood, opening my eyes fully. This was not a place to sleep. My hunger had grown to a constant hymn, a musical nuisance from my stomach. It kept me awake and yet tired me equally so. Why? Why do I exist? I asked aloud. Is it just to entertain you? No one answered. Aihdah always spoke of the unity of everything still being under constant watch. She teaches the concept of a God that created everything, from the stem of the flower to its rose and the small creatures that consume it. She also contradicts herself and tells me that it doesn't have to be that way and that a God doesn't have to exist. That for some it's about mathematical equations and the probability of everything. She says that it doesn't matter though. When someone's damaged enough, they all start to pray to something. She would never teach me more than this because I am not her student, but still, the other girls get jealous that. 14. Afterlife. Mind leak. She talks to me at all. Defensive even. Is that why they despise me so much? I looked around the small clearing the rock had been centered in. I didn't realize the significant placement or how the trees had bowed away from the clearing, as if something forceful had permeated from the center. I examined the rock that had made a preferable bench, realizing that perhaps its form and location was too perfect to be coincidence. There were faded markings that extended from the top of the stone lodged into the earth. Unfortunately, I could not read. There were other markings that were strange as well, ones I did not recognize at all, not even to be letters, and then there were two I believed I had seen many times. Above, in a circular indentation, was definitely the sun. A circle that was surrounded by speckles and small triangles pointing away. Below was something I saw often enough, the moon in one of its phases. An elliptical wedge placed in a small crevice. This puzzled me to a point where I began feeling the structure for something different. I grew frustrated when I found nothing resourceful. I hated even further that I could not read what the others were capable of reading, and so I sat wondering of the adolescent diversity between myself and the others. Was it because of one condition, if that's what I could call it? I wasn't allowed to learn, just because I wasn't born a martyr. You are not recognized by the Martyr Council and don't have a history. You do not exist in the books, and no one knows your true last name. You can't be taught our ways, because you lack the parents of martyr blood, Aihdah would say. I was so frustrated. I didn't remember my life before this place, so how could I check them to martyr records? I just felt I belonged inside. I believed that I should finally be able to teach Sadie and Tanya a lesson. Who was I kidding? I knew I didn't remember what happened prior to being found out here somewhere lost entirely before I was brought to Aihdah. It was obvious that no one wanted me. I mean, even here, I made a single friend. Again, the reason would never be taught to me. Maybe they did think I was dangerous because I was adopted into the estate mansion. Maybe that was viewed as undesirable and worthless, more so than I had previously decided. But the mother Aihdah took me in to shelter me. That should count for something even if it had not been for very long. 15. MJ Ennis. I didn't even know how long it had been since I arrived here. The thoughts started to cloud, and when that happens, I get very groggy and sometimes even fall asleep. Because of this, I try not to think too hard of the past. If she believed I belonged, shouldn't everyone, or was that a reason to detest my belonging? If they had just given me a chance to prove I was smart. I just didn't have the written version for my thoughts yet. They still were occurring. I had meaning for them. I began to doze. My eyes had dried after I had sat myself once again. I could hear crickets now, despite the sun still being visible in the red distance. I heard something between the rustling of wild plants and dead tree limbs. It started off quiet and then grew quite rigorous. It was coming closer. I stood again, alarmed. I listened for the direction, and then when my eyes followed from where I had last heard the noise, I saw something dark and full of shadow, lurking just beyond the edge of the clearing. The noise started off slow again, scraping against the brush, and the low-centered figure prowled nearer. The things that ate little humans alive. The terrors that lived beyond the fence. It was something we all talked about, and we had always been advised to stay on the homestead side for the sake of our safety. They were here, at the door of the forest. I started to run, instinctively, before seeing its face. I fell when I turned, bracing my palms in the cool grass. Then I heard Mary's voice. "Enniah," she was calling out. "Enniah, where are you?" she shouted. "Mary?" I lifted myself. "I'm here, over this way." We shouted each other's names until we found one another in the middle, nearly forgetting I had stumbled across a fence terror. "I'm glad you're okay," she said. "It's getting late. Aihdah and the others will be looking for you." She was exhausted from her run. "You came?" "Yes," she cried excitedly, but also awe-stricken, as if a terrible thing had happened. The others were disciplined. Aihdah saw through them. She says the dogs will arrive by nightfall. We must hurry. What's so bad about dogs? 16. Afterlife. Mind leak. They had to get their special gear to search for you. They figured you could have gotten much further early in the day. Aihdah says they need it for special protection from the spirits in the night. I couldn't wait for them. "Come, Enniah, we should move." I could hear strange whining coming through the trees. The wind picking up sounded like a child whispering between the earth and woodlands. When Mary turned to lead the way, she froze, and then when I looked I did too. A dog was wandering the exit of the clearing. I'd never seen one so ferocious and agitated. The eyes were narrowed and aggressive, glaring in the way of offense. The black of its fur was ridged and up on end. These perhaps were the fang monsters, but how and why? It edged closer, ready to attack. The dogs we had on our side of the fence played and did tricks for treats. They never once looked at me in the way of this animal. I decided, as did Mary, that this was not the time to think of the obscurity. We both turned in. One movement and sprinted for an exit in the next. Mary panted, exhaling words on every available step. "I don't think we can out. Run it." All I could do was try. I started to pull ahead of Mary. She was already tired, and I was born to run. When I looked over my shoulder, I realized very suddenly that Mary would be attacked first. I slowed to face our follower. "What are you doing, Enniah?" She called out in a single gasp. "Run!" Mary was closing the gap between us. The dog was seconds behind. I couldn't outrun the dog. Neither could Mary. "What do we do?" I shouted. I picked up a stone, carefully zoning my target. I hurled it just behind Mary and landed across the dog's nose. "We can try and fight," said Mary, now near enough to use her inside voice. "I don't know how to fight." Mary began searching the floor of the forest. She freed up a dried-up, lifeless branch. "I'll teach you. I'll teach you everything I know." "How?" I shouted. The dog gained a step on Mary, and she swung with all her might. The branch broke across the dog's neck. Mary both attacked and evaded at the same time. 17. Ennis. You can almost always swing hard enough and fast enough to deter the approaching dog. The dog whined and howled, rolling for a moment while Mary had leapt to her feet. She began looking for another branch, particularly something larger, and I did as well. The dog, however, was ready upright and closing in on Mary. The canine leaped at her, and soon after, the two were rolling along the leaf bed below. "No!" I cried while I hurried towards her. I threw down the branch with intentions of freeing Mary from the dog. I was too late. Mary's arm was deeply penetrated beneath the shoulder. The dog would not let go. "Run, Enniah," she cried again. The dog growled as I continuously beat the stick over its head until it broke, too. "What are you doing?" I voiced to the deaf creature. It began to pull Mary by the arm. She screamed. I chased after them, suddenly fearless. I wanted Mary back. The dog finally got caught between two closely grown trees where Mary's figure was too large for the space between. I hurried to the side. I prepared for devastating pain. I placed my hands around the dog's neck, trying to squeeze the life out of it. It bit down again, readjusting its grip on Mary. She must have fainted because she was not screaming anymore. No, not Mary out of all people. I wedged my arm into the jaw of the attacker, and then my foot, hoping my shoe would soften the blow from the clamoring teeth. The dog whined while I kicked at its ears and then its eyes. Why wouldn't it let go? I was so consumed by anger that my temperature rose, my breathing, my heart rate, and my desire to kill had escalated, even after the dog showed signs of letting go. It bit her again, this time around her neck. I screamed. No logical order came from my voice, just anger and hatred. While laying beside them, I felt around with my free hand. I found a heavy rock and followed the desire to mimic what I had endured. Hatred. I lodged the stone first against the dog's head, and then when its grip had let up, I placed the stone, my arm, and my entire weight down the throat of the wild animal. It whimpered and howled against my lodged skin and rock, and I held it there for 18. Afterlife. Mind leak. Long time. Seconds turned to minutes while the leaf-strewn bed of the forest blew against us, and then it finally died. It suddenly seemed colder. My screams were sure to be heard by the others if anyone was near. My arm had endured many scrapes and cuts, some that even felt like burns. The thing that hurt the most was Mary, for she was not breathing. Please wake up, Mary. I don't know what to do. Her arm was mangled, torn. The deep patches of red where it was wettest caused me to squirm. She was losing all her color through that wound. I removed my top layers, using my softer cotton shirt to wrap her arm. Like this, Mary? I sobbed. Is this how I do it? I had felt so cold and alone. All I wanted was Mary, her laugh, her protection, and her spirit. Yes, that's it. That's the right idea, Enniah. I heard her words of encouragement. Still she did not move. It was her voice in memory, my imagination. I removed her shawl and wrapped it tightly around her neck where the wound had escalated. I could still hear something close to her chest. While I lay against it, I could feel its beating. Her heart was still there. I found this cool stone. I really wanted to show you. I raked her dark hair with my fingers, removing the gritty markings of nature. Well then, show me. I blinked a few times. I realized I may have heard the voice from the past, but the experience was surreal and novel to me. It fit the situation only. It had never occurred to me before. Mary, are you talking to me? No, I thought. Mary was unconscious and unresponsive. She couldn't be. Describe the stone. I looked around, spooked even. Mary, just give me a minute. My body is resting. How are you talking to me? I asked. Temporal stone. I leapt for joy inside. You're going to be okay then? I asked quite happily. No, I won't be. Why not? You're breathing, somehow speaking to me, and your heart is still going. 19. MJ Ennis. I'm too far away for any kind of physical healing, and I am bleeding to death. Mary's eyes opened slowly. She was using her lips to speak again. You're awake. Where am I? She replied. I looked to her peculiarly, with eyebrows distorted. You were just talking to me. I'm sorry, she said. I remember you told me you found something interesting. You're dying. I just want you to describe the rock thing to me again. I sighed. My muscles were tired, my body ached. It was just an odd rock with the moon and sun on it. The soul sanctum of Luna. What? Yeah, it's a place for the dead. It's buried beneath the earth right now, right? I guess so. I sighed. I couldn't read the markings on it. Well, there is an entrance somewhere. It's my biggest secret. What do you mean? Well, it's sort of our secret. There is something about the place that is strange. Aihdah keeps something surreptitious in there that she doesn't want anyone to know about. The problem is, she doesn't know how to get in anymore. Mary attempted to stand. She felt the wound by gracing the silk around her neck. It hurts very badly, especially when I talk. She turned to face me, her blue eyes piercing in contrast, the reflections of the leaves in her eyes. All I could do is wonder in fear if these were some of my last moments with her. Take it easy, I said. It was something Mary would usually voice to me. We have to get you back. Mary fell roughly to her knees before fighting to stand back up again. All right, let's go. Mary somehow convinced me to let her guide. She told me that the entrance to the shrine was not very far, that maybe, just maybe, if her blood would hold in long enough, She could show me the secret. The path was not an obvious one. Fallen trees, a creek, and a swarm of irksome insects Mary referred to as mosquitoes distorted our journey. 20. Afterlife. Mind leak. After about 10 minutes, Mary had led us to a large valley in the soil, a place where the earth swooped down into a large crevice. There was an entrance of sorts, made of large gray stones, uniformly laid upwards on their sides, fitting tightly together like the photographs of old castles. The near entirety of the castle, or shrine, as Mary called it, was beneath the earth's blanket. Mary made her way to the beginning of the soiled slope, and I tried to persuade Mary to return to the homestead. 21. Chapter 3. The Sanctum of Two. Halves. The air here was warm. The second clearing in the forest was much like the first. The trees on the edge of the clearing stood tall, high above the horizontal line where the sky met the earth, like a protective and concealing wall of timber. Mary, we need to get you to the homestead, I rationalized. You need help. We don't have time for this. Mary shook her head. There might be another dog. We can't risk it. There is something inside that may heal me. Are you sure? We only saw one, and we beat it. The others may not find you here even with their gear, I said. Mary still seemed uneasy with my suggestions. I have another idea on how to get down the ravine, Enniah, she said with a smile. What is it? I asked. Okay, her grin lessened intentionally. Well, to get down, maybe I can use you as a sled. A sled? I asked. What's a sled? A transportation device used in snow to get down a mountain, she grinned. Sometimes in sand or dirt, though. And you're going to use me as a sled? I glanced down the ravine. Rocks and plants sprouted up from the descent. I'm not sure, that doesn't sound like it would work. Mary limped to the edge and encouraged me over. She couldn't make it down without help, so she sat me down and spread herself halfway on my lap, with her feet hanging towards our destination. 22. Afterlife. Mind leak. This isn't how you usually ride a sled. It's traditionally more fun. We'll have to pace ourselves somehow, but I think we should move reasonably slow if we do it right and don't turn into a ball on the way down. I was positioned beneath Mary for the most part with my back against the ground. She was sprawled out over top, with her hands grabbing at the sides and her feet used to create friction against the changing earth. We slid down the jagged path slowly, with small bumps and pauses on the way. Mary whimpered occasionally when we did hit obstacles and had to readjust her bandages on one occasion, but for the most part we couldn't stop laughing. It was exciting when we hit less bumpy areas with grass. We hit a huge descent where it got suddenly much steeper, and we immediately flipped over and separated from each other's bodies, linked only by a mere 3 fingers. Mary grabbed my hand, and with her grip, I pulled us back together while pushing my feet into the dirt and using a free hand to grab at whatever I could, little twigs and small groups of weeds. We began nearing the end of the steepest descent where it was about to turn rough again. Mary suddenly was quiet. I pulled her on top of me like a plank, and I endured the worst of it until our pace slowed again. We were nearing the bottom of the curve, or what was left of it. I could tell because the earth was starting to grow like a large wall around us. I managed to steer around one last section of rock by placing my hand in the dirt, as I noticed the seam to pull us in the direction where I created friction. I think Mary would have appreciated that small finding. We made it to the bottom. Mary had fainted. I stood up a little wobbly. Mary, I voiced loudly. Strange noises of insects and animals filled the air. She was unresponsive again. I dragged her towards the large rectangular doors made of solid stone sheets. There was something etched into the face of the header, perfectly centered, and there was a larger plate of stone that recessed into the support of the structure. To get a better look, I walked a few paces back in the small landing. In the shade of the headstone and shroud, there was an etched crescent moon not much unlike the symbol I had seen on the 23. M.J. Ennis. Strange rock I had sat upon above the ravine. The only difference was that there was a face upon it, the profile view, as if the lower section of the wedge was the chin, and there was a small protruding nose in the middle, and a single-out looking eye pressed into the upper half of the wedge. That, despite having no orientation or movement, seemed to be watching me. I wonder what it all had stood for in this use, whoever had etched the symbols or built the structure. What were they trying to say? Mary, what does this moon with a face on it mean? Instead of looking at me, her body laid lifelessly with heavily closed eyes. Oh, please don't be dead, I thought. I thought maybe she would talk to me with her mind again, using the temporal stone, but she didn't. I couldn't imagine the weight of the stone that supported this structure. I couldn't even move the one lodged in the earth above the landing. My legs ached now, and I was getting too tired to continue. On. When I knocked on the entrance as if asking passage, I imagined the insides of the chamber echoing around madly, which seemed strange for such a large structure. When I did this, the visuals of large elliptical pulses emulated from where my clenched fingers struck the smooth stone, 3 all together. Large translucent waves pulsating indefinitely from this location, ricocheting off of every surface the waves made contact with until they dissolved amongst each other, and every other noise spreading out from the forest and the ravine. I had a sudden urge to push with my remaining strength, and the door slowly slid across the beveled floor forward. It then started to slide to the side, vanishing into the large exterior made of stone. The movement of the door gradually filled the first chamber passage with light during its rolling travel. It finally locked against something with a large clunk. It was as if the insides of the first chamber were all made of marble. Everything was reflective and luminous. I hurried inside, my eyes taking in the ancient feel of the structure. How old was this place? My every step surfaced an echo. Otherwise, the insides of this place were sound resilient, and the voices of nature had gone suddenly extinct upon entering. I hurried back to Mary and dragged her into the chamber. I started panicking. What do I do? Where could I find help? There didn't seem to be anything beyond this room and the far corners. 24. Afterlife. Mind leak. Eventually became too dark to see anything. My face darted in every direction in hope of sign or safe passage. When nothing occurred to me, I hurried back to Mary's side, which was sprawled over the dark floor. She had come out of her swoon again briefly. There is something guiding me, Enniah. We must do as it says. What is guiding you? I asked. A female spirit, she whispered, like a ghost. Mary's words were all very similar in tone. Yes, she wants to show you something, she said without flinching. I'm scared, Mary. She understands. Go to the far wall, she says. Mary's arm lifted as if held up by a string. I followed her observed direction and her will. As I ventured the first chamber, its length a great hall, I came to a darker entrance where light dwindled into nothingness. Mary's voice called from a now distant entrance. Sing, Enniah. I can't sing. I responded. It's what the spirit wants, she replied. I don't know what to sing. She says AC flat. I contemplated this. I didn't know what AC flat was. Why don't you sing it, Mary? You always had a better voice. I can't sing, Enniah. I am too far away. My throat is damaged. Sing high, Enniah. Like this? I narrowed the opening in my throat and resonated using a slight vibration from my center. You're going to wake the dead with that voice, Enniah. That's a screech. My voice cracked. I came to an abrupt close. Isn't that what I'm trying to do? I said matter-of-factly. I guess so. She says you have to sing high, but not in such a violent, distorted pitch. It has to be consistent, like you are trying to shatter a glass window with your voice. I've never done that, I sighed. She says move closer to the center of the room and try again. As I continued to send out this terrible sound, I wandered about towards complete darkness. How do I know where I am going? 25. MJ Ennis. Wasn't sure I could break a glass with my voice, but maybe I could kill a mosquito. Listen to the recoiling sound, replied Mary. Right. Recoiling sound. I moved around, directing my voice to the ceiling. The echoes did in fact help me navigate to the center. The sounds would get louder as I approached the walls, and then again the resonance would get quieter when I found a hole in the walls or route of passage. When I found where I believed to be the center of perhaps a circular room, Mary called me again. a little higher in pitch. The sound that echoed through the corridors, even when I had stopped pushing out new vocals, was very loud. It was powerful and deafening. I continued to fluctuate to Mary's cue, which now seemed quite far away. I had navigated around at least 2 angled halls before finding the circular chamber, and it was so dark I couldn't even see my fingers. Just a little higher. I adjusted, my voice narrowing to a high-pitched ringing. I wasn't singing, I was screaming. A little more. She says you're almost there. Your voice isn't the same as those who created the chamber. That's it. Stay where you are. That's it. Enniah, you're doing it. I closed my eyes listening to the echoing madness and released as much vocal energy as I could. You got it. Don't stop. I opened my eyes. The sight was breathtaking. We could hear that a large object had fallen somewhere, someplace deep within the stone. Stone could be heard grinding along others. A different kind of beautiful I hadn't experienced before revealed itself before me. Dust and loose dirt started to pour from the uniformly spaced joints in the ceiling. Every few moments, with the draining sand from above, more light had entered the reflective purple chamber made of sparkling stone. It was noisy. I could see my hair again and my hands. The stone surrounding us was gritty and crystallized on the surface, but had a deep, protruding, mystical purple glow. I can't believe what I am seeing, I said aloud. This was so amazing. The grains had left entirely now. A small square tile in the center of the ceiling had permitted a majority of the light. Now the room was bright enough to make out the unique. 26. Afterlife. Mind leak. Markings and shape of the room, which actually wasn't entirely circular, it was angled with 10 separate walls that surrounded the corridor evenly. Above where the fine stone and sediment had drained was large circular openings varying in size. The sound that resonated was so deep I could feel the vibrations throughout the chamber stone still shaking me. One section of the perimeter made of the 10 opposing stones had opened to reveal a small passage. On the far side opposite the entrance from which we came was now a large mirror with highly decorative serpent bodies wrapped around the individual panes. Above the 3 mirrors, the 2 outer of which were angled in towards the center, were the heads to these serpents. They each had 2 gemstones for eyes, some which matched and some that did not. The colors were red, blue, green, and yellow. Now what, Mary? What do I do? How do I save you? I felt a cold hand on my shoulder that made me jump. It was damp, wet even, but the viscosity was not thin like that of water. It was thick and warm. I hadn't realized that Mary had made her way into the room. Don't be frightened, she said when I had directed my attention to her near face. She was smiling slightly. An eerie feeling arose that I'd never forget. The purple fluorescence of the room mixed with her cloudy eyes to create a stormy feeling. Her skin was still pale where the light touched, only ghostly lit from all around. 27. Chapter 4. A Grave Pact. I might be able to save Mary. The words had come from Mary, but I knew now that the spirit was talking. There is a very powerful energy beyond this chamber that grants access to such abilities. I just stood there spellbound. The voice of the cold spirit spoke again with Mary's body and nothing more. It was chilling and off-key, like a worn instrument. There is a condition, a treaty, a law, that you must not break, child. I nodded. I will offer protection to Mary if you never speak of this chamber again or how you entered it. I nodded. There is something else I require to bring Mary back. What is it? I asked hastily. I will need your life. What? I balked. It would seem impossible no matter how much I wished upon it. Yes, the spirit relayed, but only for a moment. It felt hauntingly sinister. Darkness had seemed to be creeping in from all directions as my despair had continued. Was the room losing its luster? My eyes darted around from the floors and to Mary, the shadows slowly drowning us. Yo, you can do that? I asked shakily. I spoke in disbelief. You can take life and then give it back? 28. Afterlife. Mind leak. Well, just to reach something on the other side of the serpent-headed mirror. I will need you to trust me. Allow yourself to die, but only for a moment. Together we can take something beyond this mirror that I cannot hold myself. Will you agree to give up your life in exchange for a chance to save Mary? I cannot guarantee that you can return. What is this? What was it thinking? It seemed so unnatural. However, I shouldn't know.